Welcome to the Hirewell Recruiting Insights podcast. I'm your host, James Hornick, partner at Hirewell. Today I'm joined by a special guest, the Senior Director of Sales Enablement at WellRight, Stephanie Benavidez.
Thank you for having me, James.
Benavidez, sorry.
Benavidez.
I mispronounced it. Anyway.
That's okay.
Okay, it can only go downhill from here. So we've known each other for quite some time.
Yes.
I work with you a bit. And the reason why I was really excited to have you on the show today is that you've got a lot of experience hiring salespeople and hiring different types of salespeople.
That's correct.
And that's a challenging thing to do.
It
So
is.
like all hiring is hard, but salespeople I think has their own challenges. And I wanted to, if you maybe first give us a bit of context about yourself, like your career, what your role is at WellRight, the type of work you focus in, the type of people you hire, just so everyone kind of understands kind of where you're coming from.
Sure. So currently I'm the Senior Director for WellRight, Senior Director of Sales Enablement. Sorry, it's so new. I actually just got this promotion. But typically my background has been in sales operations, sales enablement, supporting outside sales efforts. Today, I oversee a team more on the enablement and operations side, but I have a very dotted line to the outside team, our reps that are in two different channels of business. But yeah, I'm involved in the hiring for all these different roles on my team. So
Okay.
from that BDR all the way to an RVP of a territory.
Got it. Okay. So, and that's the thing too, is I think there's so many different types of roles within sales, the junior roles, senior roles, that there's different kind of, there might be some different things you need to dig into or things you might vet more seriously on a higher level and certain things you can train people into on a lower level. So,
Right.
and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But I've always thought, I guess just to kick things off, like no matter what the competency is, whether it's recruiting for salespeople or just anything else in life, like you learn more from when you screw it up than when you get it
Yeah.
right. Because a lot of times when you get it right, things just happen to work out,
Sure.
and you don't really, you didn't know why it worked. It just kind of did. And I think that was one of the first things. So like, if you can, in terms of like vetting mistakes, so when you made a bad hire, you know what I mean, or someone who just didn't end up being a good employee for whatever reason, from a vetting standpoint, what are things that you've seen missed or things that you've missed in the past you've learned from or that you think other people miss quite often?
So I think it depends on the role, but I think in some of the senior roles where we've had a referral and it's been maybe this is, somebody I've worked with previously, I think referrals are great and I don't discount those. I mean, every single role that I've had has been a referral, basically,
Sure.
including WellRight.
Yeah.
But, you have to really can't just rest on your laurels and just sit back and say, oh, this is my guy. You still should vet that person, right?
Yeah.
And understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and salespeople have a lot of charisma, and sometimes they are able to really persuade you, right? And
Yeah.
maybe take over the interview a little bit just because they're used to leading a boardroom. So there's been situations where I'm like, wait, are they interviewing me or what's going on here?
Yeah.
Which I think, can sometimes detract from what you're trying to do because they are so good at being, the commanders of the room.
Yeah.
But sometimes that is not a good thing because maybe you weren't able to ask those specific questions that you maybe have identified a weakness on your team and you're trying to find somebody who is not,
Yeah.
in that same vein, like, they don't use Salesforce or
Yeah.
the tech stack. And they're like, hey, I'm just kind of a lone wolf and out on my own and just trust that I can do the job well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one area that, if they overtake the room,
Yeah.
that sometimes is not a great thing, right? I'm trying to think of some of the other things.
Well, I think that, so back to
Yeah.
the referral thing, because I've seen that a million times,
Sure.
like in our business. So like, I think it's a natural, whether you're a recruiter like myself or whether you're a hiring manager, there's always that, there's always that feeling in the back. You just want to get this role filled. And somebody knows somebody. Easy. This is perfect.
Layup.
Like
We've
one thing I
got
don't have to worry
this.
about because like, somebody, but I think that's something we've seen a lot is it, it's you have to make sure you're vetting everyone fully and not just rubber stamping
Right.
like someone's referral that comes through. And sometimes like referrals are different kinds. Like sometimes it's somebody's friend and they may be a great person and their friend might be trying to help them out, but
Sure.
they might not know that this person does not have the background that they need for this role, or they may actually have no idea like what they are to work with. Like, because being someone's friend versus being someone's like coworker, you know what I mean? Like it's two very different things.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes people, they feel pressured by their friends to refer them to things You know what I mean? Even though it may not be.
Sometimes companies are giving referral
fees, yeah,
right?
exactly.
And
So like you just want to, you don't, and if it's not in your team, like you're like, not my issue. You know what I mean? I just want
Sure.
my $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So.
But I do think, referrals are a great thing. I do think that they're a wonderful, olive branch.
Yeah.
But also saying, I don't have a lot of professional work experience with this person, or maybe you do, and maybe you can help fill in the gaps to say, in your interview, maybe you can ask a little bit more questions around X, Y, Z.
Yeah,
right?
and let me underscore that by saying it is by far and away the best way to hire.
Yes.
So referrals are the best way to get to build your company up, but it's not a perfect way, and you just have to be kind of cognizant of that because you can definitely make bad hires by making assumptions. So
yes, the other lesson learned, if I can just interject, was not doing like practical application type communication exercises or maybe a pitch on the spot, because salespeople need to be able to think on their feet. And whether that's the BDR role and you're setting up that voicemail, right, to just quickly leave a voicemail with what you're calling about, who you are, what the company is, a quick pitch, that first intro email, follow-up email, etc. I mean, that was something that I figured out, I think, a little too late in some of my hiring practices, where it's now a standard.
Yeah.
Same thing with any of those intermediary and then, outside rep roles, asking them to quickly develop a pitch, whether it's, hey, tell me about, a TED Talk that you've been thinking about. You've got 2 minutes, go.
Yeah.
Or rather than sell me this pen, I don't really like that.
Yeah,
But
that was like the worst era, especially on LinkedIn. Like the amount of people, like I remember in those days, like when that movie came out, everyone's saying, "Here's the best sell me your pen example I've heard." I'm like, it's still terrible.
yeah, no, I don't like those.
It was the reason why the movie was about like awful sales techniques. I'm like, you're not supposed to take it seriously. Anyway. I digress. But I think to your point, like vetting. I think when you're mentioning people kind of taking over the interview, and it's easy to kind of fall in love with candidates that might be great at talking or great at certain things, that there's so much goes into sales besides just the ability to talk on your feet. Or talk on your feet is obviously great, but there's always gaps. No matter like me, you, anybody else, there's always going to be some gap in what we do or what our skill set is versus the position we're able to get hired for. It's just whether or not you're aware of those gaps when you're hiring that person, because I think there's certain things you should always be willing to train your employees up, but if they have more gaps than you realized and they're less ready for the job, like I can think of examples, like if someone's they might be able to talk great, they have a great attitude, but they might be just an atrocious writer, and maybe you can work on that.
That's part of why I do that communication exercise now, is because I realized somebody they struggled with it, where I had to set them up with a writing course.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to put this person on a PIP. I didn't, right out of the gate, I was thinking, all right, how can I set them up for success? Let's download Grammarly on their desktop. That's like a quick fix, right?
Yeah.
Let's, set them up for success. Maybe they are struggling. Maybe there's an underlying problem here. I don't know, but it also identified a reason to have more templates and things in Outreach, which is what we use for our outreach. Jeez. But all to say, that still requires some, again, thinking on your feet, the ability to just personalize messaging, because you can't just send boilerplate stuff to people all day long. It's just going to be deleted.
Yeah.
So that was one reason why I kind of put some of those other measures into place. But if you find that out after you've hired that person, gosh, I really wish I would have identified that during the hiring interview process.
Yeah, and that's the thing is too, like I'm a big believer you're going to have to train people on something. It's just a matter of knowing if there's more things you need to train them on than you realize, then it becomes a complete time suck. So that's why it's having the awareness and making sure you don't skip over certain aspects that you don't necessarily aren't always top of mind. So anyway, in terms of like vetting, just getting into that further, like I don't know if we want to go. I don't want to make this about like top favorite sales questions, but like, you know what I mean? Like certain things you always want to hit on, or certain techniques or ways you go about it. Anything that you want to underscore that you found helpful? Like you kind of mentioned it with like the exercise you just mentioned, but what else, I guess, do you think is important to kind of dig into from that standpoint?
Behavioral questions, scenarios and situations, asking about their wins in book of business, I think is, especially if it's like a higher level, asking them, tell me about a difficult sales cycle. How did you push them to the goal line? Goal line, yeah. Anyways, the finish line. What else? Flexibility. So we're a startup technically, and being able to be dynamic with change.
Sure.
Understanding if somebody is going to roll with the punches if we change the playbook next week with a process, or if they're going to be like, gosh, this place, I can't get my footing because you guys are changing. Change management is important, but also understanding if someone is dynamic and able to be, a chameleon, that's important to us as a growing organization because, we're always changing, and I think that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
We're changing for the better. I have so many other ideas.
Well, there's one, I'll lead you into one, because you mentioned this when we met the other day, video calls.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So we use a platform where we can basically, see everyone. I think phone screens are dead a little bit.
They should be dead. I think that
it's always, you can never really gauge when someone is pausing and then you talk over them and you can't see their body language. You don't know if they're, I think it also forces them to be in a spot where they can take the time to have a conversation with you versus sitting on the street corner and someone drives by and, rap music is in the background, because that's actually happened to me before where I'm like, where are you?
Yeah.
So video calls allow me to see somebody's ability to make eye contact, their mannerisms. Are they engaged? Are they sitting there? Are they slumped? Are they bored? Are they looking around?
And I can, even taking out of the sales context, like I've known for years, back when I was doing tech recruiting, that was always an issue where people are, I think they're Googling the answer to this, but I can't tell. You know what I mean? It's one of those, but I can certainly see from keeping it kind of specific to sales, it's definitely
I would say it's definitely I think more
presence and attention, and
correct.
are they being mindful about the interview? You know what I mean? Versus,
and not everybody is an extrovert that's ready to snap it on, right? Somebody in tech and a developer is probably not going to like sitting on a camera with you, and they're going to be like, why is this guy putting me on a camera and wanting to have a conversation with me? This is awkward.
Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about just a small amount about the difference between senior reps, your outside reps, and BDRs, and how you might kind of vet things a little bit differently between the two.
Sure. I think some of those soft skills that, you can't, not that you can't teach them, but I think they're just osmosis, maybe. I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
But, some of those commanding of the room, not thinking on your feet.
Having presence,
presence
having
factor.
Yeah. How fluid they are.
How comfortable they are with using different technology, how comfortable they are in their process. I mean, they just have more, experience, right? And maybe their experience can even help make my team better. So I want to know about your experiences. What tools have you used? What's, what successes or fails have you had? So I think when you're hiring some of the, very determined and hungry, BDR people, that's the other thing, I feel like as you're hiring fresh blood, I guess, maybe they're a little bit more hungry and determined and willing to roll up their sleeves and work really hard. Whereas you have to make sure that you're going to get that same level of engagement from somebody who does have a lot of experience, because the last thing you want is somebody, not that it's dead weight, but somebody who is just as hungry at the, senior or RVP level on that outside team, that they're going to hustle just as hard. Again, startup mentality. You've got to really, be the CEO of your own territory. Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's always kind of difficult to gauge is someone's drive and desire, because people can turn it on in an interview and you don't find out until. And that's
so hard to gauge, right? And I think that's why you do employ a team effort when interviewing people, just to see are they consistent in their responses. We actually have a new HR manager, and she's employed a survey after each of the interviews to make sure that people are not just walking away going, yeah, they're good, go ahead. Like, why? Could you give me some qualifying responses? Yeah, I didn't like them. But why?
I'm so guilty of that, by the way, because anytime we hire, we have a panel of people, and I just trust everyone else is going to do a great job vetting, and then I'm just like, I really need to get better feedback on these.
But it's helpful just because we'll have this survey and it'll force us to have like an actual sit-down debrief, talk about the whys. Maybe that person brings up something that this person over here didn't realize, and they're like, oh, I'm glad that you dug into that. Yeah. We've also have those teams of people, it's like a set of 2 people each, where they're tasked with asking certain questions. So if it's a sales engineer or sales enablement type role, maybe our VP of product is digging more into their technical capabilities, whereas that's not my sweet spot. And don't ask me to ask those kind of questions because I don't even know what to ask, truly. But, that person does, and so they can really get in there and give me their feedback as to, is this person winging it?
Yeah.
Are they flubbing it? Or do they actually kind of know what they're talking about?
No, it makes sense. It's having that kind of team effort is great, and I think that organizations, true startups, really struggle with this because these are the kind of things that once you've been around for a while and you have to have like failures to know how to do it. And I think that's why I love having these kind of conversations, because like our audience is very much a mix of people who are experienced or might be experienced people starting their company for the first time, new sales managers trying to hire, and I think these are all great points you bring up. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Thank you.
One thing I pulled this. We had the podcast we had last week was interesting because my guest really talked a lot about how retention is what's made hiring easier, and just your ability to do a good job of training and retaining employees that permeates through the organization. So everyone else who's it's not just the people on the interviewing panel, they're going to be happy about their job and help sell, but your employer brand is going to get out there in terms of other people who work at the organization are going to have nice things to say, which makes it easier to kind of hire. So, and I know from the conversation we have in the past, like retention is definitely like it's always on the forefront of your mind.
Sure.
So I'm curious if like what you think is important, like how you go about kind of retaining employees, kind of what your take is there.
So I think when I joined, I had nobody reporting to me, and now I have a team of what will be 8 people. And when I'm interviewing people, I'm always thinking about potentially what their next role may be on my team, because I've built out these levels, I've built out these different segments and niches based upon, interest or necessity and gap, for our company and our department. So retention, career pathing, setting goals. We just became members of Sales Assembly here in Chicago, which we're really excited about. They offer a lot of opportunity in terms of training and certifications and networking and things like that, which I think is really great. So as new members, I'm making it part of everyone's KPIs on my team to attend at least once per month. Maybe that gives them a different flavor for learning new skills. So they'll go attend that, come back, and then debrief and teach us, because maybe presentation skills is something on their goals. Because they do want to be an outside rep in the next 5 years. So setting that tone from the beginning and understanding, hey, Emilio, what are your goals when you join us? And okay, you're joining us as a BDR, and now he recently, actually, this is a real person, just got promoted on my team.
That's awesome.
So, building out this plan for him and others on my team is super important. I have somebody else on my team who has done teaching, and so I can very much see her doing sales training eventually, hopefully, if she's watching this, which I know that she is.
Yeah.
Maybe that's of interest to her in the next couple of years as we're, again, building out different segments on my team. Again, it's all about meeting their needs and goals, because I want to keep them as an employee. If they're a good performer, a high performer, please don't go somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, meeting the needs of the company and identifying gaps of maybe where we need help, training, RFPs, CRM hygiene, finalist presentations, like all these different things are part of a sales cycle, but who's doing it? Not the outside rep can't do everything, and then also have 10 meetings a week. So.
Yeah. No, I think that this isn't even specific to sales per se, but I think one of the companies that do a great way of kind of getting people into doing, like, getting them to want to try out, giving them opportunities to try stuff that's not their core job. You know what I
Right.
mean? It allows them to expand their skill set, and it just breaks up the day, frankly. And
I mean,
it's
yeah,
a trend I've
sales
seen.
can be
Yeah.
like kind of a grueling, monotonous process, and if you don't give them other things to be interested in, special projects, then
Yeah.
they might, if you're a BDR and you're getting objections all day and you're just building lists and doing research and finding the right person and smiling and dialing and trying to stay motivated,
Yeah.
like, well, what's next for me? So I think identifying what can they be working on? Can they be helping with reporting and building dashboards in Salesforce? Can
Yeah.
they be helping with presenting some stuff in the playbook at next Monday's meeting? So I'm always trying to, like I said, keep those things in mind so that they can be on my team.
Yeah, it's like all the time in recruiting, I can definitively say that the companies that have this approach have way better retention than those who. Usually, when I talk to people who want to leave their job, it's most of the time. There's a lot of reasons probably, but like just feeling stale.
Well,
you just
or
have
people
to
leave their manager, and so
Yeah.
I've had some bad managers in my day.
Yeah.
And I think learning and understanding what they did and hopefully not doing that to my team. So giving them, more opportunity, having an open door,
Yeah.
all of those things.
Okay. One thing I want to mention too, like any advice, the one thing I've always liked about sales is, it's very much like recruiting. Like no one went to school for it, right? Everyone, everyone kind of fell into recruiting or sales or whatever. It's the one field anybody probably could do. There might be some gaps people have, but let's say someone want to make a career change, they want to get into sales, or they're interviewing for your team. Maybe it's a junior level job or whatever. Making a career change is always tough, though. And I talk to people all the time in different industries trying to make that change, and there's certain things I always advise them to try out. What do you see? If someone wants to get into sales and they haven't done sales previously, what advice do you have?
I would say there's a lot of opportunities on LinkedIn in terms of different groups and things that they can, podcasts they can listen to. There's different books that they could be reading. I mentioned Sales Assembly is a thing that I think they offer career fairs and different trainings where they could go and immerse themselves into the, that industry and understand, like, what is it? I think I was telling somebody earlier before we started the podcast that I had a BDR who was going to be graduating in May. I had them actually come in yesterday and shadow our team.
Yeah.
I wish somebody had given me that opportunity when I was graduating college.
Yeah.
I said, look, I really appreciate, your excitement. Do you even understand what this role does? Like, maybe we can consider you when you do actually graduate.
Yeah.
But come in, meet our team, come to a team meeting, shadow our BDR, shadow our sales enablement specialist, our proposal writer, maybe understand like what we do. And from there, you can hopefully apply for jobs that you actually understand what's being said, asked of you.
Yeah.
So I think, there's opportunities out there in terms of learning on, like I said, LinkedIn. I'm trying to think of the name, SDR Chronicles, I think.
Okay.
Morgan Ingram, he has like a really good podcast that I think is helpful. John Barrows, I'm trying to think some of the other ones that I've got saved on my LinkedIn. But these are different podcasts that I'll ask my team to listen to, come back, report, share their findings. There's so many books out there. Just go on Amazon and look up.
Yeah.
Predictable Revenue is one that our entire team reads. Challenger Sale.
Yeah.
Trying to think of some of the other things that are,
I think the important thing too is just that, like, knowing if someone is trying to make a change like this, just that they are taking these steps. You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
if you were to interview somebody and they want to make a transition to sales, and you ask them, okay, what books are you reading or what podcasts are you listening to?
I always ask that question, like, what book are you reading?
And it's just like, blank stare because they haven't done anything.
Like,
Like,
who
if
reads?
you want to be if you want to be taken seriously, like it's the kind of homework you need to be doing. Like you'll never be in sales until you're in it, but at least like you've shown like
You're not
the
going to learn
interest.
it by osmosis,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So anyway, is there anything else you wanted to cover today? Anything else you want to highlight?
I don't think
It's
so.
not
I
a
think
loaded
we
question.
talked-
Maybe we're done.
I think we're good. I think we talked about the career pathing and, just being upfront with, your leadership. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for coming. I'm going to read this outro text for the podcast,
Okay.
which I usually butcher. Thanks for listening to Hirewell's Recruiting Insights podcast. If you like what you heard and want more insights from our recruiting experts, visit hirewell.com/recruiting-insights. That's always the hard part. And remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. See you soon.